everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. Today, we're going to be doing a pretty in-depth analysis of, in my opinion, the three closest Senate races of the cycle. Now, as you may see some people saying, "Oh, these races may be closer," or "These races may be closer," or "Oh, this race won't even be close." But in my opinion, the three closest states are going to be the states of Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. These are three states that went to Joe Biden in 2020, but also went to Trump in 2016. They're pretty much the three big battlegrounds of the country, other than maybe a state like Michigan or Wisconsin. But yeah, these are pretty much the three most competitive states in the country right now. They all have Senate races there, where we are seeing pretty much dead heats between Republicans and Democrats. Now, when it comes to how I pick these races, you could maybe make an argument for a state like Nevada or a state like New Hampshire. But recently, polls have suggested the state of Nevada is probably going to go Republican, while the state of New Hampshire has kind of been going Democratic. So while New Hampshire and Nevada are probably going to be the other closest elections, Nevada in recent months has gotten pretty solidly for the Republicans. Adam Laxalt has pretty much, I don't want to say locked that race up because I think it's going to be close still, but he has done very well in the polls that it's clear Nevada is leaning towards the Republicans, while we're seeing the reverse happen in New Hampshire with Democrats beginning to poll a lot better in the state. So the three states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, as I said, three states that were won by Donald Trump in 2016, but flipped to Joe Biden in 2020, and have very unique political backgrounds, but we'll get into that later when we cover these races in depth. So we're going to start in the state of Pennsylvania, which in my opinion is going to be the closest election of the cycle. And in that election, we have Dr. Mehmet Oz, the Republican nominee, versus John Fetterman, the Democratic nominee. John Fetterman is the former mayor of Braddock. It's a pretty small town near Pittsburgh. Used to be a very big steel town. However, it has gone downhill over the last 20, 30 years or so. Well, Dr. Oz is obviously Dr. Oz, host of the TV show, heart surgeon, the guy that you see on TV. So basically, for the longest time, this race seemed to be a lock for John Fetterman. I mean, if you look at some of these early polls, Fetterman was up 9 points, 11 points, 13 points, 5 points. But recently, this race has tightened quite a bit to the point where Fetterman is only really up by 2 in pretty much every single poll. Emerson, if you've probably heard me talk about them a lot. The two most accurate pollsters in the country, really, in my opinion, are Emerson and Trafalgar. Both of these polls are usually very, very accurate. They have their off days occasionally, but overall, Emerson and Trafalgar are the two best polls in the country. And if we look at the most recent poll from Emerson, they have John Fetterman only up by 2 points. This was conducted at the end of September. Meanwhile, Trafalgar also only has Fetterman up by 2. So clearly, if you look at the two most accurate pollsters, this race is pretty much a dead heat. But if we compare these results to previous polls, Trafalgar's last poll in this Pennsylvania Senate race also was Fetterman plus 2. But Emerson was Fetterman plus 4. So Dr. Oz has gained 2 points in the Emerson poll, while John Fetterman has basically stayed the same in the Trafalgar poll. However, I do want to note the Trafalgar poll for this cycle, the most recent one that has Fetterman up by only 2, was also done in coordinated with the Daily Wire. Daily Wire is not a very well-known or good pollster. I don't think they've ever even polled a race before. So that kind of tells me there might be something a little bit off about this poll. But it does seem to be in line with the more recent polls. This poll from The Hill and Emerson has Fetterman plus 2. Another poll from Fabrizio and Anzalone has Fetterman up by 2. And then a poll from Fox 29, which is a local Pennsylvania news station, has this race in an exact tie. And if we look at this here, and when RCP, the Real Clear Politics, which is the pollster I'm using, and is usually the more accurate pollster, they adjust the race compared to recent polling results, you know what I mean? Because, the polls have been pretty horrible in the past. I mean, according to polls, Trump was supposed to lose in an absolute landslide in 2020, and Hillary Clinton should have been the president in 2016. But yet Trump won in 2016, and 2020 was a very close election. So the polls are never that accurate. And so Fetterman is, as you can see here, Fetterman is leading in all the polls. But when you adjust for the recent polling errors and, the polls traditionally oversampling Democrats, you have right now RCP has Dr. Oz winning by almost 3 points, which I think is pretty much in line with my prediction right now. I think Oz is probably going to win by about 2 points or so. Oz is clearly surging. He has all the momentum, and Fetterman's campaign is just falling apart. Like Fetterman, really him not debating originally, him having the stroke and having some of those rough interviews, and then also just him being absolutely horrible on the issues, just getting exposed. I mean, Fetterman, in Pennsylvania, he's not all that well known. The people that do know him think he's just like a sane blue collar I guess you could say traditional Democrat kind of guy, but he's not. He's a pretty far left candidate, and he is pretty cringe in a lot of issues. He is pretty far left and pretty cringe in a lot of issues. All I'm gonna say, and especially when it comes to Pennsylvania, like Pennsylvania, that is like the big place for fracking, and like Fetterman being opposed to fracking. If Oz just campaigns on that, then Western Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh area, well, not really Pittsburgh area, but Western Pennsylvania, they will turn out heavily for Oz. They're not going to vote for someone who's going to ban fracking. That is a big reason that Donald Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016 was because Hillary Clinton said she would ban fracking. Fracking is a huge part of Pennsylvania's economy, and Western Pennsylvania. The other thing I want to note the other thing I want to note is that Western Pennsylvania, which is traditionally a more Republican part of the state, kind of near the Ohio-West Virginia border, that part of the state is usually a solidly Republican area. Traditionally, it votes heavily Republican, but yet is being undersampled. So more likely than not, when you adjust for the fact that the normal polling misses already, as well as the fact that the areas that traditionally vote more Republican are being undersampled, the amount of people they're polling from that area is less than are probably going to vote in the election, then Fetterman's probably losing right now. And I would be stunned if Fetterman manages to win this election. I think that now that Dr. Oz is finally getting some good funding, finally starting to really campaign out there, finally starting to unite the base, I would expect Dr. Oz to probably take the lead in a poll or two, maybe next week or so, and I would expect him to maintain a very slim advantage in the polls, probably going back and forth up until Election Day. But I do believe in the end Dr. Oz is going to win this race. I just don't see how Fetterman can win at this point. His campaign has absolutely fallen apart. The polling has tightened quite a bit, and it's clear Oz is surging. So the next race we're going to look at, we're going to mark Pennsylvania as lean Republican, which officially puts the Republican Party at 51 seats in the Senate. So according to my prediction here, Republicans have officially won back the Senate. But let's look at some other races. Let's see how many seats they can get. We're going to go to the state of Arizona next. This is a very interesting state. Mark Kelly, the incumbent Democrat, won by a pretty, I don't want to say pretty sizable margin back in 2020, but he won by a couple of points. So it's clear that and he is a pretty good candidate for Arizona. I'm not denying that fact at all. Mark Kelly is overall he's a good fit for the state, at least in terms of how he portrays himself. The way he votes, him on the actual issues, he's horrible for Arizona. He's a partisan Democrat. Arizona is not a partisan state for either side. Arizona is a very swing state that is known for being pretty moderate and pretty pragmatic. I'm not saying Blake Masters is that, but he is at least honest about who he is. And Arizona is certainly a state that is, I don't want to say trending Republican because Arizona is trending Democratic, but the Republican base there is very energized. I'll just say that. And so Mark Kelly, he was elected in 2020 by about 3 points or so, and the polls way overestimated him. According to the polls, Mark Kelly should have won by like 10 points in 2020. He won by about 3. Excuse me. He won by about 3, and he campaigned on being this, this moderate, centrist John McCain, but with a D in front of his name. And he was like, I'll be the moderate Democrat. I'll be John McCain, but as a Democrat instead of a Republican. He has not done that at all. He has voted with Biden 100% of the time. He has gone against everything he campaigned on doing. He hasn't cared about the border. I know for some people that may be like, who cares about the border? The border is a huge issue in Arizona. It's a huge issue. Blake Masters obliterated Mark Kelly on that in the debate. And as we're seeing here, Blake Masters is beginning to surge. This was another race. Everyone said, similar to Arizona, or similar to Pennsylvania, that there's no way that the Republicans can win. Mark Kelly is too strong of an incumbent. He's well-liked in the state. He is very popular, and there's no way Republicans are going to win this race. However, as Blake Masters has made this race very competitive. Trafalgar has Mark Kelly only up by 1 right now. Local news networks only have Mark Kelly up by 2 and up by 4. CBS and YouGov only has Mark Kelly up by 3. Fox News has Mark Kelly up by 5. CNN has Mark Kelly up by 6. CNN and Fox are both pretty shitty pollsters, going to be honest. Data for Progress, a Democratic internal pollster. This is a poll that was conducted by the Democratic Party, only has Mark Kelly up by 1. And then Emerson, which was pretty much spot on in Arizona in 2020, I believe, they only have Mark Kelly up by 2. So when you look at the pollsters that are actually more accurate, the Trafalgar, Emerson, local pollsters, Mark Kelly is only up by about a point or 2. And sure, as of now, Blake Masters is probably still down, and he has not led in a single poll or tied, which I would like to see him do before I really call this race, because I am a little bit concerned about Blake Masters. I'm not going to say, I'm not saying for sure he's going to win, but when you compare the polling results in Arizona so far compared to the results of the polling results in Arizona from the last couple of years, the polls in Arizona always oversampled the Democrats. And if Mark Kelly's only leading in the spread by about 2.5 points, I don't see a reason Blake Masters can't do about 3 points better than that and win Arizona by a very slim margin. Blake Masters is a pretty smart guy. He's running a very good campaign for the state. Arizona's a pretty moderate, pretty centrist state, and Blake Masters has done a perfect job of uniting the more right-wing base of Arizona. Well, also he's beginning to appeal to the moderates, as we're seeing as Kelly's lead is slowly getting cut down. So I do believe in the end that Blake Masters is probably going to pull off this race off very narrowly. I'm a little concerned about Masters' chances, not going to lie, but he has been surging in recent months, or in recent weeks, really. Same with the Republican Party as a whole. I think the red wave as a whole is going to really help some of the candidates like Blake Masters, who are a little on the fence about. So I do believe Blake Masters is probably going to win by about half a point or so as of now. I don't think it's going to be a landslide victory for Masters. I think Kari Lake is going to do a lot better than Blake Masters just because she's a little bit more well-known, a little bit better campaigner. And that's the other thing, too, is that Mark Kelly is basically known by everyone in Arizona. Everyone in Arizona knows Mark Kelly. He's a national hero because he was an astronaut or something, and he is now a senator. Everyone knows Mark Kelly. Who heard of Blake Masters until like a month ago? No one. So Mark Kelly has such a huge name recognition advantage over Blake Masters, and so it's just interesting to see that despite that, he's only up by a couple of points. I think once people are going to vote Republican, Arizona is still a Republican-leaning state. It's a moderate Republican-leaning state, but it is still a Republican state. And if Blake Masters just continues to use this extra money that he's getting from the Republican Party, as well as Peter Thiel, he also continues to surge in the polls. I do think he is very narrowly going to pull off a victory here and win this election. Now we're going to come to the state of Georgia, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit concerned about for a while. Herschel Walker has had a bunch of scandals come out about him recently, and you may be thinking, why would you still support Herschel Walker if he's had all these scandals about him? Well, quite frankly, if Herschel Walker is getting exposed by all these scandals by the mainstream media less than a month before the election, that just makes me support him even more.
Losing weight
it means this guy is an absolute chat. Like honestly, if the mainstream media, if you're running for office and the mainstream media posts a bunch of stuff about you trying to make you look bad so you lose, I'm probably just going to support you more. Going to be honest. And Herschel Walker, he's also been polling pretty well overall compared to other Republicans. Other than the huge dip he had after the scandals, he's pretty much came back. Before then, this race was a dead heat with Herschel Walker having a pretty narrow lead in a lot of pollsters. This is a race that for a long time I really thought Republicans, or Herschel Walker, I should say, would win this race. I thought Walker would win pretty handily. Unfortunately, those scandals have really come to hurt him and made this race a lot closer than it probably could be. I think if those scandals never came out, then I think Herschel Walker would probably be leading in a couple of polls right now. But even with the scandals, which hurt him for a while, as you can see, Warnock was up by like 3, 4, 7, 12 even in one poll. However, recently, it's Warnock plus 1, Warnock plus 2, and now it's high. So Herschel Walker, the scandals hurt him temporarily, but you got to remember that the average American voter is like a 5-year-old when it comes to their attention span. They see a news story about how Herschel Walker is like had kids with these women and left them, and they scream, "Oh my gosh, Walker sucks. We gotta vote for Raphael Warnock," and they're gonna vote Warnock. Then a week later, like the inflation's gonna go up a little bit, gas prices are gonna go up a bit, and they're gonna be like, Walker, we need to vote Walker. Fuck Raphael Warnock, excuse my language. But really, that's the average American voter. That's literally your average American voter is just like, they change from week to week. And with Republicans surging nationwide, it's clear the scandal is not going to hurt Herschel Walker as much as we first thought it was going to. It did for a little while, kind of like the Access Hollywood tapes did hurt Donald Trump in 2016. In 2016, when the Access Hollywood tapes, Trump said grab him by the you-know-what came out. Everyone was like, this is over. Trump's polling numbers dropped. Everyone said Trump has no chance of victory, and yet he went on to win the election. And the polls pretty much tightened a week later. And that's what we've seen here with Herschel Walker. The polls clearly showed Raphael Warnock surge for about a week or so, and now the race is tightening back up. Georgia is still, like similar to Arizona, it is still a relatively Republican-leaning state. It is vastly changing. Georgia is no longer the state it was 10 years ago. It's no longer the Southern Baptist, conservative state it is. It's now pretty much a mini California, at least in the Atlanta area. But still, there are enough conservative voters in the rural parts of the state that it can outvote Atlanta and allow Herschel Walker to breeze to a narrow victory. And even if Herschel Walker does somehow lose on November 8th, I highly doubt Raphael Warnock does get over 50%. Georgia, similar to a lot of southern states, has an interesting thing where if a single candidate does not get more than 50% on election night, they have a runoff election for just the top 2 candidates, which takes place in December. So let's say that Raphael Warnock manages to win in November. So let's say maybe he wins by about 2.4, which we said. But he only gets 47% of the vote. Like RCP, Real Clear Politics, right now has Raphael Warnock winning by about 2.5 points, but only getting about 47%. Let's say that's the end result. Let's say Raphael Warnock gets 47% of the vote, and Herschel Walker gets 45% of the vote. So Raphael Warnock wins on election night. He's not at 50%, so there will be a runoff in December. But as you can see here, Republicans already have control of the Senate. If you're a Democrat in Georgia, are you really going to turn out if Republicans already have the Senate? No. If you're a Republican in Georgia and you just had a massive victory across the country in the House and the governor and the Senate, are you going to turn out one more time to finish it off? Hell yeah. We saw that in Georgia in 2020. Joe Biden managed to very narrowly carry the state of Georgia, and for the first time, it was the first time Georgia's voted for a Democrat since like the 1990s, and Democrats were super energized. Biden's victory made Democrats think, yes, we can win this state, and they turned out crazily for the runoff, and thus we got Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff in the Senate. Back in 2020, the Republicans won or excuse me, David Perdue, the Republican, he won the vote in November. But he didn't get 50%, so there was a runoff, and the Democrats were super energized because Biden had just won the state, and David Perdue lost, and that's why we have Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff in the Senate. And so because of that, I think the same thing is going to happen, but in reverse. As of now, I think Raphael Warnock probably does win on election night. I don't think he's going to get to 50%. I think Republicans are going to win in Pennsylvania and Arizona, giving them the Senate majority pretty handily already. I mean, a two-seat Senate majority is, not the biggest majority, but it's still a majority. Democrats are not going to be energized. Herschel Walker is going to get energized turnout in the rural areas. Republicans are going to be like, yes, we took back Georgia. They're going to turn out, and Herschel Walker is going to pull off a very narrow victory in the end. So with that, this is the Senate prediction as of now. I just explained my reasonings for the three most competitive races, why I think they're going to vote the way they are. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe for more.